Good morning, scholars. Hope this video continues to find you all happy and healthy. Let's jump right into what today's writing prompt is. Your writing prompt for the last day of March is related to the reading that you read yesterday in class, Kathleen, the Celtic Knot. Based on the excerpt from Kathleen, the Celtic Knot, write a narrative that reveals the events at the beginning of the story to show Kathleen's character development. Use what you know about the other audience members' reactions, the setting, and the internal dialogue of the protagonist to match the tone of the original story and the characteristics of Kathleen. Write a full plan following the norms of narrative writing. Write a complete multi-paragraph narrative and include dialogue and figurative language where appropriate. Now, while on the surface, this prompt seems and looks a little bit different than the narrative prompts we have done before, it really doesn't change how we approach it. So what feels different and what should feel a little different is that we're asking to write the beginning of the story, where in the past we have focused more on writing the end of the story. That doesn't change our approach when it comes to making sure that we understand who the protagonist is, and in this case, who the narrator is, considering that we are writing from the perspective of that narrator and of that character, which in both of those cases is Kathleen. We're going to approach it the same way, where we are thinking about who this character is, what the setting is, and what the overall tone is. But the only difference is that when we have our understanding of who that character is, the tone, the setting, and all those things, we use what we have identified as writing a new scene for the start of the story as opposed to the end. Now, this story is unique in that it is something that doesn't really go over tons of different plot details and doesn't really change all that much from where the story begins. But what we do get from it is a lot more understanding of who our protagonist is by the internal dialogue the author uses for her when she's on stage getting ready to perform. So I want to start off with a example from our last narrative together, which was related to the Bogart. And this is a student in Bates who I thought did a particularly good job of using some text features, such as italics and bold writing, to show where internal dialogue is happening in her original narrative. This is her writing as it is. As I went into the bathroom, I sleepily reached for my razor, but when my hand hit the blank window sill, I really looked around and saw that it wasn't there. I thought, and then here's where the italic starts to show that this is what this character is thinking. I thought, I leave my razor here every morning, so where is it? I looked high and low and couldn't seem to find it anywhere. I looked up at the clock to see it was 9:35. I missed my appointment. And only after I came out of the bathroom did Maggie bring me my razor. So she uses these italics here and sort of these moments of realizing that she's in real trouble, like missing this appointment. Use those moments with exclamation points and some of those other text features that we tend to add to show that this is really something that's causing this character panic. This is very indicative of what we saw in the passage you guys read yesterday, Kathleen and the Celtic Knot, and therefore suggests there's a lot of opportunity for us to continue to do this style of writing when we are writing our own narrative. That alone would not be enough to suffice you writing this character as you should, which is this character that is very much the same as it was in the original story. So I also added here another example of how you can go about marking up your text to pull out some of these characteristics of the protagonist that you're getting ready to write as. As you notice in this first paragraph, there were some moments that I highlighted or some moments I've underlined that I thought really spoke to who this person is. First paragraph alone. Wondering what on earth I was going to do. I couldn't remember first step. Everything that had happened flew out of my head. So I made note of all these things that I thought revealed a lot about our character and put a note on the side for me to sort of gather my thoughts on what I was seeing. So far, everything in the first paragraph suggests someone who was really nervous about this performance, but also was really taking advantage of this moment to shake off problems from earlier in the week or the past couple weeks. Definitely something I might want to account for when I write my own narrative. Second paragraph. Or I was going to dance my heart out. Dance did me proud. Again, this here shows someone who's a bit instinctive, whereas before she was nervous, her instincts eventually kick in and she's ready to dance her heart out. She's proud and she's definitely passionate about dancing. Third paragraph. I hardly knew where I was, and I was completely oblivious to the audience. Somewhere in the blur of humanity, all I wanted was for the music never to stop. And again, this almost speaks to her being like in a trance or in a mode of really, really, really being into this dance or like in the zone, so to say, and really just sort of shaking off many of the other things I think were troubling her. And then the last paragraph, I was worn out, weak-kneed, panting, fit to collapse. And this again suggests that she's someone who is exhausted, who's someone who leaves everything out there, is extremely determined. Again, a lot of things to really pick apart here to use as a guiding principle for how I describe this character and use the voice of this character in my own narrative. So my recommendation is, along with doing these sort of annotations for your reading, to really figure out what are some of the actions this character has, what are some of the actions this character has taken or has done in the original passage that you want to continue to emulate. Basically just helps you identify who this character is. After you have your notes, I would suggest using the other resource available to you for today, which is the character traits and the list of possible character traits of characters, to really sort of figure out who this person is, who your narrator is before you start to write. So there is a lot in these two categories here of confident and nervous that I think applies to her in different ways. These are things that I think are areas that if you can identify your character being this way, would make it a lot easier to have dialogue and match the tone and match who this character was in the original passage. Okay. With that said, let's return to what today's prompt is, and let's make absolutely sure that we are all on the same page with regards to what you are asking. You're going to be asked to respond to today. All right. So once again, today's prompt goes as follows. Based on the excerpt from Kathleen the Celtic Knot, or the Celtic Knot, write a narrative that reveals events at the beginning of the story to show Kathleen's character development. Use what you know about the other audience members' reactions, the setting, and the internal dialogue of the protagonist to match the tone of the original story and the characteristics of Kathleen. Create a full plan following the norms of narrative writing. Write a complete multi-paragraph narrative and include dialogue and figurative language where appropriate.